Hi, this is Team 6. We're reporting on Tyson Foods. First off, we're going to discuss who Tyson is and who are their customers. Secondly, we're going to go over micro and macro economic scenarios that have impacted them over the last 10 years. And then last, we're going to conclude by going over micro and macro projections for the next 5 years, as well as our suggested course of action. To start, what is Tyson's product? In 1935, Tyson was founded and started by selling chickens in small Midwest markets. Today, Tyson is one of the world's largest food companies. There are 4 major operating segments: chicken, pork, beef, and prepared foods. Tyson Foods actually produces 1 in 5 pounds of the total chicken, beef, and pork in the entire U.S. In fact, 35 million chickens per week on average are produced each year. So what do they sell? Tyson offers through various brands, including Tyson, Hillshire Farms, Jimmy Dean, and Ballpark, as well as some of the others listed below. Currently, their main products range from pepperoni, bacon and sausage, to pizza crust, soups, and processed meats. Tyson has 3 main distribution channels sold in over 130 countries. 53% of their sales is consumer products. We also thought to note a large factor of this is through Walmart. In fact, 17.5% of their business is through Walmart. This is the largest of all of their business, and there's no other customer that they have that accounts for more. Now we're going to move on to their microeconomic scenarios that have impacted Tyson over the last 10 years. We're going to start with demand. First off, chicken consumption demand has increased 8% over the last 10 years, while beef consumption has decreased over the last 10 years by 10%. Some of the factors we feel have included this are non-price factors like preference, income, inferior goods, and substitutes. Back in the 1980s, beef was under scrutiny by many health organizations linked to heart disease. As a result, the demand for beef decreased and chicken began to overcome that. Since then, it's been the same trend. We've noticed that chicken is a substitute, and the CEO currently, Tom Hayes, has stated that he feels like there are even meatless substitutes now. Protein consumption in general is growing around the world, and they feel like plant-based protein is going to be the way of the future. Moving on to microeconomic scenarios dealing with supply, Tyson contracts its farming to more than 11,000 farmers. This is more than $15.4 billion for cattle, hogs, and growing chickens around the United States. In fact, $4.1 billion is right here in Nebraska. More than 4,000 farmers raise chickens for Tyson Foods. For cattle, Tyson doesn't own or operate any of their feedlots, so they buy their cattle from independent feeders and ranch, as well as pigs from almost 3,000 independent farmers that supply them with pork. In this slide, you'll see that there's a chicken trying to get caught, and we feel like this is a great depiction of what it actually looks like when someone's trying to herd a chicken. Unlike pigs and cattle, they can't be herded. They must be grabbed by the hand from their large chicken houses. Manufacturers such as Tyson have been able to adapt and purchase machines capable of catching chickens up to 150 per minute, saving them on human capital. Production in the chicken industry has also forced them to adapt over the years to reduce some of the costs and increase the supply. As you can see from this chart, the process from processing is 46 days. Tyson has been able to decrease that time, as well as significantly again lower production costs by making scientifically formatted feed for their pellets and broilers. Now Jeff's going to slide on over and talk to you about market structure.
I'm Jeff Franz. All right, for market structure, we decided Tyson is an oligopoly competition due to a few companies controlling the market. 4 companies control over 80% of the beef market. 4 companies control over about 60% of the chicken food production, and 4 companies control about 65% of the pork food production, and Tyson Foods is in the top 4 of each of these markets. And as you can see through the drawing or pictures, Tyson is number 2, both in beef and chicken. So another reason why we decided that Tyson is in an oligopoly competition is that Tyson has some control over the price of its production or products. Technology to produce mass amounts of product at a lower price and advantage of economies to scale against smaller companies allows them to have lower prices. Tyson with the other large companies hold the advantage against the farmers in contracts because they produce such a large amount of the meat market. They have the ability also to slowly raise prices and increase their profit margin. As you can see in this graph, throughout the last several years, their profit margin has increased. So it wasn't until the 1970s that Tyson began to shift from a monopolistic to oligopoly competition. From 1954 to 1970s, the 4 largest companies in the broiler chicken industry, they only accounted for 18% of the market. Mergers were the biggest reason for a few companies to begin dominating the market. They were able to reduce costs by achieving economies of scale to purchase feed, medicine, and equipment at lower prices. So now we'll move on to the macro portion. All right, so this first slide, we have how the industry affects the GDP. So agriculture, food, and related industries contributed $992 billion to the U.S. GDP in 2015, which is 5.5% share of the GDP. The output of America's farms contributed $136.7 billion of the GDP. And the below graph, this shows how farming's value of the GDP has been a little erratic, but fairly steady since 2007. And the largest growth has come from food service and manufacturing sectors. So this next slide will cover employment in this industry. In 2015, 21 million jobs were part of the agriculture and food sectors, which is 11.1% of total U.S. employment. Direct on-the-farm employment accounted for 2.6 million of these jobs, which is only 1.4% of the U.S. employment. The U.S. food and beverage manufacturing sector employed more than 1.5 million people. This is just over 1% of all the U.S. non-farm employment. And the below graph, this shows U.S. employment in the food and beverage manufacturer sector. Shows that about 2011, it had a pretty significant rise and then has stabilized out the last year. So this next slide will cover consumption. With 12.6% of a typical U.S. household's 2006 expenditures, food ranked 3rd behind housing and transportation. The percentage people spent on housing, food, personal insurance, healthcare, and savings rose slightly in 2016. And this graph here, it shows a big range of years where GDP has grown significantly, and at the very bottom it shows the food sector where it has continuously had a slight growth. And then this slide will cover the exports in this market. It's estimated that beef exports this year will be up to 200 million pounds compared to 200 million pounds compared to 2015. So from 2006 to 2015, beef exports have grown from 1.62 billion to 5.62 billion. Pork exports within those 10 years have grown from 3 billion to 5 billion pounds, and broiler exports in those 10 years have grown from 5.2 billion pounds to 6.6 billion pounds. Almost 18% of the poultry produced is exported. And here we'll cover the Fed rates. During the Great Recession from 2007 to 2009, the Fed pursued lowering interest rates to exceptionally lower levels to provide monetary stimulus. Interest rates have remained low in the period since due to a slower than expected economic recovery. With low interest rates, loans to fund company growth, Tyson was able to buy out competitors. They've been able to expand to be fully vertically integrated in poultry production and invest in prepared foods and culinary research. All right, now I'll give it over to Chris.
We will now discuss the micro projection and estimation for Tyson Foods. We expect Tyson to make even bigger moves in the meatless protein market. They have just invested 5% into Beyond Meat, which is a plant-based meat company. They have also invested $150 million into a venture capital fund that is looking for startups for other meat substitutes. Tyson has also seen setbacks in the past few years with investigations around fixed pricing and animal abuse. They are also looking to replace livestock with meatless meat to help crop productions, as well as create less greenhouse gases and help combat climate change. We believe that these reasons will begin to change people's preferences and result in a change in the demand for meat. We believe that the meatless trend growing at this rate will provide the meatless product to be a substitute for people looking for creative ways to get their protein. We will now discuss the macro projection and estimation for Tyson Foods. The Fed has recently stated that they expect to continue raising interest rates slowly as they believe that the economy is strong. We expect this to not alter Tyson's current strategy, as they can continue doing business throughout the interest rate increases, but they may look to accelerate a few projects to take advantage of the lower rates. We also expect that U.S. agriculture exports to continue to grow as people around the world are eating more and more protein. If the agricultural imports for the U.S. continues to be stable and exports continue to grow, we believe that the U.S. GDP will continue to grow at the 3% it has as of late. To continue, we also believe that the meatless demand in that industry will begin to trend up even faster, which may have effect on the employment rate in the meat industry. We believe that this will not have as much effect on Tyson due to the fact that this change will be offset by exports increasing and making up for lost sales in the U.S. We feel that the biggest issue is actually the fact that there may not be enough employees to fill the new roles that are needed for the meatless industry, as the U.S. employment rate has been at a lower rate recently. Lastly, we'd like to discuss with you the course of action that we believe Tyson needs to take to be successful in the future. That begins with continuing investing in new technology and markets, with first helping to create a more sustainable food system, which will be possible through the industry becoming less dependent on livestock due to the risk of disease and environmental factors that come with them. They will also need to work to clean up their image when it comes to their factories, as they've seen recent hits in the past few years. They also will need to invest in more plant-based proteins. They will also need to invest more in research and development when it comes to continuing to bring down the cost of food production. We feel that these goals will enable Tyson Foods to not only continue to set themselves apart from their competition, diversify their products to withstand market changes, but also be looked upon favorably by their customers. We feel that if they are able to do these things, they will be successful and maintain their level as being a top company in this industry. We'd like to thank you for our time. We are Team 6, and this has been Tyson Foods.